Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Los Angeles-based jazz pianist and composer Max Haymer. We caught up with him in early February 2021 about his latest live CD. It has taken him 12 years to release his new project because he's been so busy touring as a longtime member of Arturo Sandoval's band, along with his own popular trio, and also spending some quality time with singer Jane Monheit. He began studying classical piano when he was 7 years old and introduced to jazz piano at 14. He studied with the renowned Los Angeles-based pianist Tamir Hendelman. I caught him a few years ago here in Kansas City at the Folly with Arturo Sandoval, one of my favorite live shows ever. He talks about this and so much more. Enjoy.
Hey, thanks for taking a minute out today.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure. Thanks for contacting me.
You bet. So let's talk about Whirlwind, live album. Talk to me a little bit about kind of the timing. We're in the middle of the pandemic, and I guess kind of in general, how's everything going with where you're at in the world with the pandemic and having a new album out?
Well, it's a whirlwind. I mean, I think it's a perfect title for this album. This album was actually recorded back in 2019, when just before the pandemic hit, basically, and I was able to still do a live show. So I got it right in the nick of time. Releasing an album now, I feel, is the only way to reach out to the audiences that you need. And so I'm happy to have it, especially have it be live, to give them kind of that feel that they're in a club and at the show. But it's been interesting, I'm like basically a homeschool kindergarten TA right now for my 5-year-old all day.
Yeah.
And then trying to do music for the rest of the time, either virtually, in-home recording, anything like that.
So what do you miss the most? What do you miss the most about live performances? What's been the hardest thing to kind of overcome?
The interaction with other musicians. I think that's the first thing. I am lucky because I've been doing some at-home concerts safely with a wonderful singer, Jane Monheit. She lives pretty close to me, and she's a superstar, and we've been doing just monthly duo concerts, so I had that interaction. But to be able to play with the bass and drums, that's something, the trio, that's something that I really miss. And I miss kind of keeping time. Everything can be like loosey-goosey with the piano and vocal. But with the bass and drum, I miss that interaction of time. And I miss traveling, too. I was able to be on the road a lot with Arturo Sandoval for the past 4 years and going to countless cities that are on my bucket list. And that's taken a little bit of a hiatus right now, so I miss that as well.
I got to tell you, I've really thought over time about my favorite jazz show, and he came through the Folly. And I've interviewed Arturo. He's a wonderful person. We have a pretty good relationship with, being a jazz journalist and a musician. And that show blew me away. I've never seen a show that good in my life.
What show was that? When was that?
Oh, it has to have been now probably 2.5, 3 years ago, but it was at the Folly. It was downtown.
I was there. That was me.
Oh my God. That was so amazing. I mean, his stage presence, the way that he got that crowd going, I've never seen a curtain call. The only other curtain call I saw was the last jazz show I saw before everything ended, and that was Bill Frisell on March 4th. But I think about that show, and it was unreal. My wife and I walked away, and we were just speechless because it didn't feel like a jazz show.
That was a great night. That was a great night. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I remember that show.
So
really good audience, really good crowd. Yeah.
Yeah. So was it special for you guys too?
Yes, that one was a good one. I remember actually someone compiling kind of like a short compilation of some of the pieces we did that night on YouTube. And I remember feeling really warm. It was a great time to be in Kansas City. It was cold. I remember going out for barbecue after with some of the patrons of the show, of the theater. And it was just a great, that's when the shows are the best, when there's a sense of community, where it's not, you're playing the show, then you go back to your hotel room. When you feel like we also want to hang out with the people that came to see the show, because there's just a respect that we have for the audience members as well. It just doesn't go one way for audience to musician.
Yeah, for sure. So you got on the jazz piano at 14, and you started learning from a relatively legendary person. Talk to me a little bit about how your jazz seeds were planted.
My jazz seeds were planted. I really have two avenues that really shaped me. One, I started with fantastic pianist here in LA, Tamir Hendelman. and he really started the path and the journey. That just how to really focus and learn the fundamentals. Luckily, I had some technique background from my classical studies, which actually kept going through my jazz studies in high school. I was doing 2 lessons a week, and so that really kind of helped project me into just that lane of being a technical jazz player, which Tamir is very much so. So we're able to be on the same wavelength. And then after that, when I went to college, I went to kind of the opposite side of the spectrum, and I started learning with Kei Akagi, who is a Japanese-American pianist and was Miles Davis's last pianist. They're both on the opposite sides of the spectrum, and I like to think that I kind of, straddle and sit in between, and that's kind of where my voice is today, thanks to those two, giants.
Speaking of live shows, what was the first live jazz show you saw that really blew your doors down?
You know what? I think I saw when I was, I don't know. The one that I remember is actually seeing Tamir play at the old Catalina Bar and Grill with the Jeff Hamilton Trio. And I just remember seeing how tight a jazz trio could be, just how focused and how musical and how swinging. And that was the first live one that I remember. It's not the thing that got me into jazz, though. The thing that got me into jazz was actually seeing a performance of Chick Corea, I think with the London Philharmonic, with Bobby McFerrin conducting. And Chick was playing Mozart concertos, but when he got to the time to do the cadenzas, he would improvise. And as a little kid who was just all about classical, seeing a master, take classical music, but then put his own spin on it, I was like, I want to do that. So that was the start.
That's so weird, the orbit that is very similar between us, the fact that I saw you perform and didn't realize it. I remember when Chick came to Kansas City, and he played with the orchestra, and he was supposed to stop, and he didn't, and the whole crowd was just kind of looking around like, uh-oh, and the conductor was just kind of, I could tell, just perplexed, and he did that a few times, and I remember that really cemented an idea of jazz in my brain. That was in the late 90s. It's so funny you mentioned that, because that's exactly what he did, too, and it was awesome, because there was a level of him that could accommodate that music, but bring his spin into it, and he wasn't going to stop because he had this plan, and that's what was going to happen.
And also, that was how it was supposed to be done. Mozart and Beethoven, we just think of these long piano cadenzas as written, but that was one night where someone was able to transcribe one performance, because every night it would actually be different. Chick has actually taken, the true letter of the law there.
You were on soccer scholarship, obviously an athlete. Do you ever look back and think that's a route that you would have liked to have taken, or had a duality? Yeah?
No, it had to happen. I remember on my college application, I wrote about how one fuels the other, and what I take from, playing soccer and being an athlete, and how I channel that into, arts and music, and then how I take the arts and music and then channel that onto the soccer field. It's very similar in a lot of ways, and I was able to kind of help each one by drawing from the other. And I miss it. That's something else I miss. I miss playing soccer right now. I was still playing in the men's league out here, and that's, hit the pause button as well.
So what do you like the best about being a musician?
The interaction with other players. I like, playing by yourself is fine. Practicing is cool, but it's the interaction and the possibilities that you can get while playing with other individuals. That's probably the best thing. And also, completing a task, whereas finishing a show, finishing a piece of music, finishing an arrangement, finishing a composition, all that is just a real sense of accomplishment that kind of drives me as well.
So if you have a dream tonight to run into your younger self, like around the time that you were starting to play professionally, and you could give your younger self advice, what would it be?
I would say a couple things. I would say love the ballad more. Don't just love the fast stuff. Love the ballad more. I would take more lessons with some of the masters, really try and I think there was a fear of people telling me, oh, you don't know enough. That kind of stopped me from taking advice and kind of expanding, my musicianship, how to be a proper pianist, how to be a better listener, composer, writer. I think I would have taken more lessons with a lot more people.
With this COVID, where exactly are you located?
Like in Studio City, California, Los Angeles.
I gotcha.
The Valley,
okay.
yeah.
Cool. Okay. So my question is this. I know LA's been through, they've been getting hammered. California's been getting hammered, and this whole COVID thing has gone through waves. And there was some shows a little bit this summer, then everything stopped. There's been a kind of a stop and go kind of a thing. But as we go forward and we have the vaccinations and things are getting a little bit more hopeful in the country, what do you see as kind of the rollout of live music and getting back to it? How do you see that transpiring?
Let's see. Well, I'm lucky that, even though I have my own trio, that I'm also employed by, Dr. Sandoval, by Arturo. And he, being a legacy artist, once it starts, they're right back on track. They're right back on tour. So I think you're going to see some of the more established acts starting to, pick up right where they left off. It's going to be harder for kind of the unestablished acts. Like, it's going to be way harder for me to get a booking of my trio rather than fly to Japan with Arturo. So it's going to be the big things first. And then I think once people get comfortable with that, then there's going to see more hiring of, the regional and local acts as well.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting take. That makes total sense because the other access of this world has a different timeline and a different place they're at too. So yeah, that makes sense.
And the clubs are going to want to, and the venues are going to want to have their sure thing to make their money first in the true economical way of it. So they're going to feel comfortable bringing in an Arturo before they're bringing in the Max Haymer trio.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
What do you hope that the audience and musician realizes about this time away from music? What do you hope that they've gotten from this?
I hope that the musicians will be more appreciative of audience members. I think musicians can get a little dark. Like, they don't know what they're doing. They want to listen to something. They'd rather go to a EDM show or just hear a DJ. Musicians can, especially jazz musicians, can get a little dark on their audience. I hope even if there's the smattering of 5 people in a club, that's 5 more people than we've had this past 11 months. I hope the audience can really focus on the magic that happens on stage live, and they miss it. I mean, we've lost one of our crown jewel clubs in Los Angeles a couple months ago for good, and that's the Blue Whale. And there's going to be less. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really afraid of. Kansas City has a very premier club, and I'm just getting more and more afraid as this keeps going on. I didn't realize the Blue Whale closed. Yeah,
in December. So we're losing places to share with audience members, and that's scary. So I'm hoping that the audience, and it's up to the audience to kind of keep it alive as well, because if they show up, we keep playing.
Agreed. Yeah. Everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're the one ultimately living your life.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think you are?
Ooh, good question. I'm very an emotional, sensitive guy. I love drama. I love theater. I love musical theater. I probably know more about musical theater than I do about jazz, really, or classical. And even though I try and portray myself as a hard-hitting, kind of power athletic jazz musician, musical theater ballads are the thing that kind of just inspire me the most. And the drama kind of drives my music, I would say.
Beautiful. Max, thank you for taking some time out to talk about the new album, your life in music, COVID, all of that. I appreciate it. Good luck with the new album, and good luck with the return to the stage.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview. We give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Los Angeles, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Max for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.